Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the J&N Circle Thrive Together Life Class Series. I hope we're all doing well today. I'm feeling nice and festive, and I'm looking forward to another amazing session with you all. So this evening, we're going to be talking about quarantine abroad, coping when you are far away from loved ones and from family. And we have an amazing lineup for you, and I can't wait to get started. So before we jump into it, a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Let me pull up my, the regular, pull up my screen so that we can have a look-see. So for those of us who are joining us, we're going to be utilizing some of our tools. We have the chat section. We also have the raise hand feature, and we have the Q&A section. The Q&A section is specifically for those of you who want to ask questions of our panelists, and the chat is just for regular comments. So if you want to ask a particular question, jump over to the Q&A box and just type your question out, and we'll get to them as we go through the segment. There's also the raise hand feature that you can use if you want to respond to something I'm saying, and if you want to be identified for a potential question also. And something to bear in mind, we're going to be having a very leveled up conversation, a very interactive conversation. So please do drop your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, your musings, your suggestions in the chat box. And we're going to keep it absolutely respectful of everyone, and keep it fun and keep it light. And at the end of it, we're hoping to have a very expanded sense of having been together in this Thrive Together Life Class series. So our panelists this evening are Gabrielle Barnett. She's an education consultant and she's based in China. We also have with us Alison Watson. She is in the agriculture sector and she's based in the UAE, which is the United Arab Emirates. We're going to be joined later on by Professor Jarrett. She's a social and behavioral sciences professor, and also by Miss Carol Thompson, who is an MSN RN. She's a nurse in the Brooklyn, New York area. Let me also draw your attention before we jump into our first segment to our poll, which has been launched. So go ahead and respond to the questions there. And we will share the results of the poll shortly. So let's get right into it. I think of it this way. So the Life Class series has gotten a visa, and we are going to be visiting several countries in our 2-hour conversation this evening, and I can't wait to get started. So let me start off by officially introducing you to Gabrielle. Gabrielle Barnett is a very brilliant young Jamaican woman. She currently is living in Beijing, China. She has been living there for the past 5 years. Of note is that Gabrielle was educated at the Johns Hopkins University, a very prestigious university in the US. She has left her footprint on 25 different countries and counting, I assume, Gabrielle, and she's fluent in 5 languages. She's going to be talking to us about what it has been like experiencing the pandemic in China, okay? And joining us also for this segment is Alison Watson, who is in the United Arab Emirates, UAE for short. And she's going to be talking with us about what her experience has been like living in that part of the world for the last 12 years, and also specifically as it relates to what it has been like experiencing the pandemic in that area. How has she been managing keeping connected to family and loved ones, etc. And if you realize I'm rocking my Jamaican colors this evening because I feel so happy to have our Jamaican countrywomen joining us for this conversation about thriving in the midst of all that's happening. So first up, Alison.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
And welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's
I think your microphone is muted, Alison.
No, it's not.
Is it?
No, it's not muted.
Okay, excellent. You're good.
Okay. So I was just saying it's 3:30 in the morning here, so I hope that my thoughts will flow and I will be coherent in my thoughts. But anyway, it's good to be here. Thank you for welcoming me.
You're so well. We thank you for joining us and for making the time, especially at this late hour in the morning time over there in the UAE. So we're curious, Alison, but first let me welcome Gabrielle. Gabrielle, welcome to the Thrive Together Live Class series. Thank you for agreeing to join us. What time is it where you are?
It is 7:35 a.m.
Okay.
So it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. But thank
Yeah,
you
it's
for
not that bad.
making the time to come into this space with us this evening. So Alison, let's start with you. You are all the way in the UAE. Can you give us
Yes.
an idea of what it was like initially, moving to the UAE, and what was the most difficult thing to adjust to in that space?
Well, we moved here 12 years ago. My family came with my husband, who got a job, and it was just one child. We have since added to our family with the birth of one son. He was born here. When we came, one of the biggest challenges was really adjusting to a very different culture that had restrictions that we were not accustomed to and languages that we were not accustomed to. So what I found was that native English speakers didn't have a second language. So if you were in an organization that used mostly Arabic or Hindi or dealing with persons who spoke Urdu, that was a challenge for us. So that was a significant adjustment. But there were persons who were helpful, and there were other Jamaicans who supported us, who had come before us and given us some tips on how to manage and move around. And we were able to fit in very comfortably.
Excellent.
For the first 3 years, I didn't work. So that also helped in settling our daughter. So eventually, I was able to get around and know where everything was.
I'm so grateful that you had people in your corner to kind of give you that, that grounding experience, because that makes a huge difference, I can imagine.
It did absolutely. And many of those have since left. And so, we are having to depend on the various types of medium to connect with those very same friends and family that are not living with us here in the UAE.
What's the weather like there? That's one of the things I'm curious about.
Well, we're now in the summer months.
For those of our audience members, to kind of give you an idea of where the UAE is, just think Dubai, right? So
yes,
that region of the world. And I'm curious to know what it feels like to live in that part of the world.
Well, in the summer months, it gets very hot. It goes over 100 degrees. But all our buildings and vehicles and public transportation, the bus stops are all air conditioned. Closer to the winter months, what we call the winter months, that would be December through to about February, March, it gets very cool and very pleasant. It's comfortable weather. So you're talking about 75, 80 degrees. So but we manage. Initially when we came, it was like opening an oven when you went outside. Yes. But now we have grown accustomed to it, and it's business as usual. Okay. I just want to be clear on one thing though, that the UAE is made up of 7 Emirates.
Right.
And of those 7 Emirates, they act independently. They have their own governance, and then there's federal, which governs all 7 Emirates. We happen to live in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. We do not live in Dubai, and Abu Dhabi is the capital. So in terms of how COVID was managed, each Emirate has their own experiences and their own restrictions throughout this time. And then there are federal laws that cover some of those restrictions as well.
Okay, excellent. So you have adjusted pretty well generally to life in the UAE. And I'm going to jump to Gabrielle about her experiences of, landing and getting used to life in China. And I'm going to come back over to you, Alison, to talk about specifically what it has been like living in the UAE, working in the UAE also during the pandemic. So Gabrielle, you have been in Beijing for 5 years now?
No, I've actually been in Beijing for almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years.
I've been in China in total for like 5 years, yeah.
Okay. And you moved there from the US? That's
correct. So after I graduated from undergraduate, I went to Mount Holyoke College. I did a graduate program, a graduate diploma at Johns Hopkins University, SAIS, School of Advanced International Studies. They have a campus in Nanjing. They also have one in Italy and one in DC, but I chose the Nanjing campus. The thing that was a little bit special about it is that all of our classes were taught in Mandarin by Chinese professors. So like I was learning about like corporate finance, statistics, nuclear war theory in Mandarin. So that was pretty interesting, yeah.
And then what was it like for you that first couple of weeks when you landed in China? What was it like in terms of adjusting? What was the most jarring thing or the thing that required more, adaptation for you?
Sure. So when I came to China 5 years ago, that was actually my second time. So I'd already had like the pre-shock of like coming to China and seeing things being stared at, having people take picture if you want to touch your hair, want to touch your skin. So all of that was something that I already got accustomed to. I feel like one of the most difficult things for me at the time was getting somebody to get my hair done, because I can't do my hair. Like I just can't. My mom usually does it, or a hairdresser does it. So when I was in China, I think that was probably one of the most difficult things. And then I was on a very American campus. So the first thing I did was like, I just went sniffing around for all of the Caribbeans and Jamaicans. And I was just like, my people.
And as you mentioned that point, Gabrielle, what is it like in terms of, the number of Jamaicans there, where you are specifically in Beijing? Do you have a strong sense of community there?
Yes, there are a lot of Jamaicans in Beijing. There are Jamaicans doing various things. Many of them are teachers. Like the vast majority are either teachers or students. And then you have a few others that do other stuff. But the Jamaicans do get together. In my neighborhood, there are two Jamaicans one is not in China right now. She's back in Jamaica. But there's a strong community here. So, and then we have like a lot of Caribbean events. We have Carnival. We have a lot of things in Beijing.
Excellent. I'm glad that being so far away from home. And we have this expression that Jamaica people, they're everywhere, because we know like that. So I'm really glad that's been your experience so far.
Every country I've been to, I found a Jamaican. Every country, from Liberia to Laos, I found a Jamaican. Every country.
We're good like that. And for you, Alison, have you found any kind of sense of community there? Being on the UAE?
There is a small community, but probably it's not like the diaspora in New York. It's quite a small and compact community, and many of the persons are living in different Emirates and doing many different things. So it's not as easy for us to connect. We're certainly not having any carnivals, but we do have small events that happen occasionally, probably like Bob Marley's and birthday, but it's more collaborative as well, because the community is so small. So we join with Trinidadians and Barbadians and that sort of thing. A more Caribbean experience than a Jamaican one.
Okay, good.
But the Jamaicans are leading. Yeah. You know how we are.
Yeah, and I don't know that everybody would love to hear that, but we kind of own it as a truth of ours that we are leading.
Well, can I tell you, and just following on to Gabby's experience, whereas, yes, we have done some traveling, but having come here to the UAE, I found that there was a small worship of Jamaicans by other nationalities, of which I was not aware. We were very popular in the US and North America and the UK. But I was finding that Filipinos or Indonesians and persons from the African continent, there was a small worship of Jamaicans. And I will give you an example. We had traveled to Petra, which is it's a touristy area in Jordan, but the persons who live within that area do not travel outside of Petra. So we had gone there, and there were these boys who were renting donkeys because the way is quite difficult to go on foot. And they're 14-year-old, 15-year-old boys. They have never left that village. So one of them asked me, where are you from? And I said, I don't think you'd know where I was from.
So you think?
So he said, tell me. And I said, I'm from Jamaica. And he said, Jamaica, no woman, no cry. And I was shocked that not only did he know Jamaica, he knew Bob Marley as well. So I never take it for granted. And there are people who are so welcoming. And in all of us, people want to be with us and people want to be like us. That is for sure.
Undeniable truth, right?
Indeed. Amen.
Absolutely. We have done well as a small nation to be so not only well known, but well loved. And our culture
absolutely
is pervasive,
Yes, indeed.
Gabrielle, I remember traveling to Thailand with a friend of mine a couple years back. And we took a tour to go to the PP Islands. And I was shocked that the driver, who is authentic Thai man, he fully had a whole Bob Marley. He had all of Bob Marley's albums playing in his bus, right? Another interesting thing for us then was how people stared at us, right? The color of our skin was very interesting to them. And so we were quite, we were observed everywhere we went. What has your experience been like in terms of, the culture being popular or not in China, in Beijing, where you are? And again, in terms of your person as a, as a Black woman living in that Asian country.
So my experience in China is a little different.
I think we may have lost Gabrielle for a couple seconds now. Maybe a connection issue, so we'll just continue talking, Alison.
Yes.
We're seeing some comments here about, yes, Bob Marley stands strong. Olivia says music is very powerful, reggae music in particular, we can't deny it. And yes, Tracy says, I am one proud Jamaican, right? By way of announcement, we relaunched the poll because a couple of persons were asking us to relaunch it. They had dismissed it in error. So we relaunched it, so you can go ahead and complete it if you hadn't already. And even if you did, please go ahead and just complete it again. So we can get a sense of how you're feeling today. And then we were definitely going to be sharing the results and then doing a post conversation poll after that as well. Yeah. Alison, Harry Burasing says, Jamaicans all over the world celebrate certain events in their own way. Independence anniversary celebrations, for example, I have some friends in Russia. So, I mean, everywhere we go, people know that we're there and they love what we do, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's check if Gabrielle has come back on so that we can.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I can hear and see you guys fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, man, we're hearing you loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. So what I was saying was that my experience in China is a little bit different because I speak the language. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility to have conversations with the people. But I do get stared at. There are a lot of people that take pictures with me. I've had people come to me and like touch my skin before. Usually when they come to me and like touch my skin and they're just like, oh my God, why are you so black? I touch their skin and be like, oh my God, why are you so yellow? Just kind of just to mirror their reaction. And then that's when they're kind of just like, oh, wow. But there are analogies that I'm able to use to explain, like, there are people that have different color skins. There are people from all over the world. But a lot of people are very familiar with Usain Bolt. They're just like, oh my gosh, 4-2. Yeah, that's his Chinese name. So they know that. And then they automatically then assume that I'm able to run fast. And I usually say I'm only able to run fast if there's a dog behind me or my mom, trying to beat me. She doesn't do that, by the way. But if she did, I would be able to run very fast. So there are people that are aware of Jamaica. Most of them are aware of Jamaica because of Usain Bolt. I think when Bob Marley was famous, China was still having their own internal issues. So they were more concerned with fixing what's happening inside than listening to reggae music at the time. But there are some Chinese people that do know reggae music. A lot of them right now are getting dreads, like the faux locks. Yes, there's a lot of mixed reactions about that, but that also does happen here.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. I'm seeing one of our commenters in the audience, Natalie, says, I hated the taking pictures with me in China. I've heard several people just comment about how people are so fascinated that they're asking you straight up, can I take a picture with you?
Yes.
Or they just go ahead and snap a picture of you. Has that been your experience as well, Alison?
Yes, but I found even more unnerving their reaction to my children. That was creepy. If we were traveling on the bus, the older women would be fixated on our daughter or son. Some of them would ask to take photos of our children with their children. And that wasn't so bad because I could understand that. But when they were staring, we felt as if, it was really weird in that regard.
We have an early question here from Olivia. Olivia Petrie is asking in the Q&A box. She says, how did you move to UAE? What was the opportunity presented? I know many people are curious when they hear of that. Right?
Yes, I actually did answer Olivia by message. Well, when Air Jamaica was dissolving or appeared to be so, many of the pilots ended up coming to the UAE to either Etihad or to Emirates. And my husband was one of those. and so he is with Etihad.
Okay.
But we have, and most of the persons with whom we were associated, other Jamaicans, including Natalie, who I know is online, and a very dear friend of mine, we were living in Abu Dhabi as a result of Etihad's employment for my husband. But there are other Jamaicans who live in Dubai as a result of working with Emirates, which is the other major airline.
Okay, that operates there. Understood.
Yes.
Now, let me start with Gabrielle. Gabrielle, what was it like experiencing with the start of the pandemic in China? What was that experience like generally, and especially because you were far away from your home base, which I mean, at this point is America and then Jamaica, right? What was it like for you at the beginning?
No, my home base is Jamaica. Like,
Okay.
I have no claim to the US but my degree.
All right, ma'am. I stand corrected.
So I actually heard about the virus when I was in Jamaica, because I was home in December for Christmas. And I heard about the virus, but then it was, at that time, it was like maybe like 5 or 10 people. And when you think about 5 or 10 people in the grand scheme of a billion, you're just like, oh, China will fix that soon. And then when I came back, and then it was at 200, and we're just like, okay, this is increasing, but it's in Wuhan. I'm in Beijing, you know, like, all's good. And then I think once it got to 1,000, that's when everyone really started to get a little bit concerned. But at the same time, like, because I live in Shuni, like, it's a suburb in China, in Beijing. And there was a case of the Black Death, you know, like the one you hear about like a long time ago. Right. There was a case of the Black Death, and then it just disappeared. So we were all of the assumption that this is what's going to happen. This virus is going to be contained. It's going to disappear. And then everyone was like, oh, you know, we handled SARS so well. Everything's going to be fine. And then I had a friend that was coming to visit for Chinese New Year, because it really blew up right around Chinese New Year. So I was just like, okay, you know, I'm not traveling anywhere. I'll just stay home and chill and show my friend Beijing. But then, like, right around the beginning of Chinese New Year, that's when people started to get concerned. That's when people started to get worried. That's when people started to wear masks. That's when people were just like, don't touch me. Yes. Don't come near me, you know, keep your distance. But then when it got out of control, and then, you know, it was a lot of mixed emotions. There was a lot of anxiety, because there's a lot of uncertainty. And I remember distinctly, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was saying to me, like, Gabrielle, you were in Liberia doing Ebola, and you got out of there. Like, why are you still in China? Like, this is worse than Ebola. It spreads a lot faster. But there was a lot more, like, when I was in Liberia, I'd just gotten there. So it was a lot easier for me to just dip out. But when I was in China, like, I've been here for so long and working here. I've been living here for so long, you know, it's basically like my home. So it was kind of very difficult for me to make that decision whether or not I should leave. And then my company, which is a Hong Kong company, they were kind of just like, we're not sure, you know, let's see what happens. And then initially there were just a little bit of like extensions, like, oh, schools will reopen in March, schools will reopen in February. And then I say schools will reopen because people use the opening of school as an indicator of saying, like, well, if the kids are going back, that means everything's fine. Right. But then things got out of hand really quickly. People from Wuhan were trying to escape to Beijing because Beijing's the capital. So they're like, China will always protect their capital. So a lot of people are trying to do that. They shut down Wuhan, and then when they shut down Wuhan, everybody was just like, all right, this is serious. So like in the beginning, there was just a lot of like mixed emotion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. To be honest, I don't think my mom slept a lot. She worries a lot. And then for me, I was just like, oh, an extended vacation, yay! And then I was just like, all right, this extended vacation can end now. Like, I don't know what's happening. So it was a lot of different things, but they had a lot of measures that they put in place that really contained, and I use the word contained because you hear 80,000 people and you're just like, is that containment? But 80,000 to a billion, I think that's containment.
Right.
They had a lot of things, and they did a lot of things to contain it well. I have some photos I could show. Could I show them now?
Give me 1 second. We're gonna launch the results of the poll first, and then we're gonna come back to your experience, Gabrielle, with some pictorial evidence, right? So we can see what you're talking about. But let me share the results. Are you able to see them, everyone?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So the first question: how would you describe your current mood? We had 52% of our respondents saying okay. 35% of you said happy. 8% say ecstatic, and only 2% say miserable. The second question was, I feel good about my future. 96% of you said yes. 6% said no. Number 3 was, what are you looking forward to most from this session? 67% of you said tips for coping while away from home. 10% said nothing, and 31% said COVID information. And 2% are looking for access to private counseling. And the final one, how are you feeling about being quarantined abroad? 48% of you said okay, 42% said you're managing, and 13% saying that you are feeling stressed. So we hope by the end of the session to have provided some resources to impact you in a positive way about managing the pandemic, managing being quarantined abroad, and being far away from family and loved ones. Yeah. So we're going to jump back over to Gabrielle now. She has some images to show her about what it has been like in China, and especially because I mentioned earlier that we have gotten our visas, several visas, and we're going all over the world this evening. We're going to stop first in China to see what was happening and what was life like during the pandemic. So go ahead, Gabrielle. And I see a
okay, awesome
comments, but that's when jump into it. So go ahead, Gabrielle.
Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, I am.
All right, awesome.
Yes.
So I just wanted to show you guys a photo of China. It's really large. And that big red dot is Beijing. I'm not sure if you're able to see my cursor, but Wuhan is down here. Let me see. So this is Wuhan right here. So you have quite a distance right there. Okay. All right, awesome. And then I have some pictures of China during COVID. So, all right, so this is my apartment complex. One of the things that China likes to do is that they like to put up these, I like to call them like propaganda image. And it's basically saying, wear masks, wash your hands, social distance, don't go into gatherings. And then one of the things that they did, so in China, we live in complexes. So it's similar. So to put it into perspective, think of like a gated community in Jamaica. And then at the entrance, there are entrance and exits. And at the complex, there is a security guard that takes the temperature of everyone that lives in the complex. And they also have to show a specific card to show that they live inside the complex. If they do not, as you can see with this young lady over here to the right, they have to register. Now, when they register, they basically scan a QR code to give access to their mobile network to say whether or not they have left Beijing in the last 14 days, or if they have left China in the last 14 days. If they have to do a quarantine. They will not be allowed entrance. And then they have to tell where they've been, their like Shenfenzhen, which is kind of like their ID number, their phone number, where they live, all of that information. So just in case this person was asymptomatic, got inside, infected everyone, they'd know how to contact her or him. This is the bank. So what they did was they kind of like streamlined the entrances for the bank, and the same thing that was happening at the gate, you could see happening here. So the picture to the left, that little girl right there, she has on her mask. They have to enter, they have to do registration. Registration is mandatory for all businesses. All of the information I just listed, they take your temperature, where you've been, you have to scan the QR code, and your contact number. And then at the ATMs, there are little papers that you could use to wipe off the ATM. before you touch it, and also afterwards. Now, one of the things that they started to do as well, some of the businesses started to do after COVID, to kind of regain trust with their customers, is to give the temperatures and the names of the people who prepare your food and also the people who deliver your food. One of the things that they also did as well was to give away free masks, kind of like as a gesture to say, like a goodwill gesture to say like, oh, we're with you, and we are, you know, we're trying to regain trust. We're trying to show you that we are healthy, and we're sanitary. Now, inside of the elevators, they had different sections. So only 4 people were allowed inside an elevator at a time, and you had to stay inside one of the squares. Additionally, every day, they have to disinfect all the elevator buttons. I'm not sure if they do it throughout the day, but I do know that they do it at the beginning of the day. But also when you step inside the elevators as well, they still have those little napkins that you could use to wipe off the buttons before you touch them. Yep, and that's it. I have pictures of like where I live, but we could show those later.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. I don't know if anybody else felt as though they kind of took a little trip to China just now, but I certainly did, yeah? And it's definitely interesting to hear the measures, the very well thought out, I would say, measures, very involved measures that the Chinese government put in place to help to manage the pandemic. From your end, Alison, what was the experience like in terms of, you know, the government's response, the management, and of course, your own thoughts about, oh my God, a pandemic has hit us. I'm not in my birth home, in my in my land of origin.
Well, the first thing that happened was that the leadership was decisive and calm. They came out with an announcement, and even on social media and when it was videotaped, they were also representative of what we should do. They sat far away from each other. There was social distancing, and the leader spoke calmly. He said that we're going to get through this. Food and healthcare will be available for everyone, in spite of their nationality or their income level. And that set the tone for everyone who was living here. So there was no panic buying, there was no disorderly behavior, and it created a sense of belonging as well, that, okay, we are here, the country will shut down and we are here together, we're doing this together. And very early on, even before many countries had done so, they shut down the schools. Middle of March, the schools were closed, and they have decided that they will close and remain closed until September. Immediately, the Education Council started to put in measures and monitoring programs to make sure that the schools were providing the same level of education to the children as they would if they were going in person. And they asked that, for example, that they reimburse the parents for bus fees, for instance. Then they started setting up field testing centers, which are all around the UAE and especially in Abu Dhabi. They're quite visible with signs. And then they shut down all the malls and business places. Persons who are working in government like myself, if you are a mother with school-age children below grade 10, you were allowed to go home first, work from home. And persons with pre-existing conditions were allowed to go next. And then everybody was allowed to work from home. And they provided computers for those who didn't have them and network services to keep the work going. And of course, essential services were available to everyone.
So I get the sense from you, Alison, that the tone that was set by the government's, you know, communication was one of the things that was reassuring to you.
It was.
Yes.
It was reassuring. And, you know, there are very, very different persons' levels of income living in this society. So to hear the leadership say that everybody would have these services, nobody would be short of food, was very comforting for those who may have lost their jobs, or they may not have health services because they have lost their jobs. But it was quite reassuring. And of course, but the different Emirates did different things as well. So you had responses that were very, very restrictive in, say, Dubai. You had to download an app to request to go to the supermarket or to the bank.
Are you serious?
Whereas, yes, whereas that didn't happen in Abu Dhabi. But incidentally, as I speak, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi is completely shut down. No one can move from one emirate into Abu Dhabi or from Abu Dhabi into another emirate. And there are three major cities, Abu Dhabi City, Al Ain and Al Dhafra. And you cannot move within those two cities either without police permission, unless, of course, your essential services, and those are already predefined. So that's a way to control.
I mean, I think we mentioned it earlier, yesterday, I believe, that in Jamaica, only St. Catherine would have had a similar experience of having like a total lockdown of movement.
Yes, yes.
That has been your experience. And for how long now has that been the case in terms of that restriction?
Well, now they're opening up. So that has been from, say, the end of March until now. And after this complete lockdown, they have started to open up, especially in Dubai. All the malls are now open. But again, each emirate is doing different things. But I estimate by the middle of June, you will see more of this opening up happening. And by the end of June, I think all services will be more or less open, but with, of course, restrictions as to what protective equipment you're wearing and social distancing and cleansing and sterilization as well. There is a curfew period during which sterilization happens, and that in Abu Dhabi is between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., where they go around and sterilize the communities and industrial areas, and you cannot be on the road at that time, or else you'll receive a fine.
Wow, and do you know what the fine is? I'm curious.
Well, it depends on which emirate you're in. I think it's maybe, I'd have to translate that to US dollars, maybe about $300 if you're breaking the quarantine.
So clearly it's taken very seriously.
Absolutely taken very seriously. But then the culture here is such that Abu Dhabi, for example, to give you a sense of how it is living here, is the safest city in the world. And there's nobody walking around with riot gear or batons. It's just a rule of law that you have to follow. And therefore, if the government says that you are to wear your masks and you're to do this and do that, you comply. And it's not a restrictive environment. It is just that you understand that this is how it needs to be.
Excellent. It's really interesting. We're getting some good feedback in the comment section. Let me touch on a couple of them. I saw, was it Claudine? Claudine is planning a fabulous situation here. Claudine says, I'm scrolling. Rose was saying that it's on her bucket list to visit UAE, Alison, and Claudine says, yes, Rose, we can go together. Let's start a joint partner plan to save for the trip. So for all of us who are on here who are bitten with the wanderlust bug, like myself, who love to see new places, you can check out the J and Partner Plan, right? To put some money for when the world, quote unquote, opens back up, and we can consider where we're going to go, right? And we also have loads of commendation for Gabrielle and your excellent presentation, very succinct, but still so informative, and it really I felt like I was transported to China. So that is definitely, we're grateful for that, Gabrielle, and the audience is loving it. Yeah. We're going to jump into a Q&A segment. I have a question here. So Delroy, I think your question would have been answered now. In Abu Dhabi, how severe are the fines for breaking the COVID law, so to speak? Paulette asks, do you consider yourself to be an ambassador for Jamaica? I'm going to ask both Alison and Gabrielle to respond, and then we'll take another question. So Alison,
who goes first?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I do. In fact, many persons only know one Jamaican, and that's me. They have never met another Jamaican. And I find that you don't have to be walking at the head of the Olympic team to be a flag carrier. We're all flag carriers, even within our own country. We represent, because then you become a benchmark to other persons in terms of your work ethic and your behavior.
So true.
So I do take that very seriously.
I like that point, Alison, because the reality is that even if you agree to it or sign up for it or not, your work ethic, your approach to everything, to conflict, to family, etc., is taken as a representation of, of your place of origin. So I definitely think that whether you agree to or not, in many ways we do,
Absolutely.
especially when we're so far away from, a big Jamaican community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For you, Gabrielle, what would you say is your response to that? Do you consider yourself to be an ambassador of Jamaica?
Yes. Can you guys hear me? I'm not sure if my internet just went out for a second.
We're hearing
Yes,
you.
we're hearing.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I do. I'm like one of the proudest Jamaicans around. People like I am that will be like Jamaica.
I think, Gabrielle, you're saying that your bandwidth is a little bit low. So I'm going to ask you to just hold on a couple seconds while maybe the internet connection strengthens again, while we take another question. So just hold tight for a quick second, and then we'll come back to you with that answer to that question.
I saw a question in the chat room rather than the Q&A.
Yes.
About the position of women in the UAE. And
Yes.
this is why I wanted to, I put in my, on my flyer, Jamaican woman living in the UAE. So in the Middle East, just to be clear, it varies from country to country. But in the UAE, they are very pro-women. And when I arrived here, I was especially fascinated by the life of women, Emirati women, and I had had no interaction with them prior to working with them. So as soon as I started working, I wanted to find the details. I wanted to debunk all the myths.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that it is, a lot of it is a misconception as to, they're walking 10 steps behind their husbands and so on. They're all educated, they're decisive. Their work-life balance is incredible. And most important is their self-care. They never fall back on their self-care, but they're managing many things: job, home, self. And I will come to that later on in terms of my coping, but that was a very important part to my settling in to the UAE experience.
Thank you for debunking some of those myths, Alison, because I know that sometimes when we think of that area of the world, we think in generalizations and we think in stereotypes. So it's good to know that it varies from place to place, so that we don't get caught up in the perpetuating prejudices and so on. That's important.
And those, and whatever, say, when I say restrictions, for example, to wear the hijab, is not imposed on me. I'm able to work and drive, and in my workplace, I'm respected as an individual and as a professional, and I feel safe, and my daughter feels safe. Nobody is catcalling you. So there is actually a high level of respect for women and how we're treated, both professionally and in public.
Okay.
And a lot of business places, sorry to be rambling on, a lot of business places actually have women's services. So they'll have a women's line, or a ladies waiting room, or a ladies something that will make her stay in that business environment shorter, because she needs to go and do something other than, and they don't want the women to be mingling so much with the, so many men.
So there's a consideration. We've been through all elements of the society in terms of regard for women and protection of women.
And protection of women, absolutely.
Excellent. I wonder if Gabrielle, are you with us? Let's check to see if your sound is.
I'm here. Can you guys hear and see me?
Yes.
I'm terribly sorry. Because a lot of people are still doing online classes in China, around this time, there's a lot of people on the internet, so it slows things down. So what I was saying was that, yes, I do consider myself, I'm an ambassador for Jamaica. I'm usually the person that's always telling people like, oh, I'm Jamaican. So like, even for example, when you're like, oh, you know, your base is like America first and then Jamaica, I was very quick to be like, no. I have no claims to the US.
Yes.
I am Jamaican. I'm proudly Jamaican. I'm the first Jamaican at my company. And as soon as someone walks in and they're just like, oh, you're from the US, because they see like I went to a US school, I'm just like, no. I'm from Jamaica. You don't know anything about Jamaica? That's fine. I'll tell you about it. All of the food I eat is Jamaican. Like I go home with an empty suitcase. I come back with a bag of seasoning and an ackee and everything. Like I'm very proudly Jamaican, and I'm really that person that, like, this is even like the teacup I used in the office. You know, like I'm that person that's just like, yes, I am very Jamaican. And everywhere I go, I'm usually sometimes like the only Jamaican someone has met. I have, like, all of the countries I've been to, I've met people who want to keep in contact because they're just like, oh, I want to know so much. I've had people who have visited Jamaica, like, and they've like, you know, hit me up, be like, hey, where are some of the places I should go and stuff like that. So I do consider myself an unofficial ambassador for my little island home.
We love it, and continue to raise the flag high, as somebody in the comment section said. We have a giveaway coming up because JN Life Class is all about sharing and caring. So in the spirit of hashtag JN Cares, we have 3 giveaways for you, and one of them is coming up. But I noticed that Rose Harvey has her hand up. Is it that you want to ask a question, Rose? And if so, our team will just allow Rose to pull up a chair on our live class page and just engage with our panelists. I'm gonna go ahead and allow Rose to speak. Are you ready, Rose?
Well, I just wanted to ask a question because I saw it on Facebook where the Chinese treating the Africans, you know, in a deplorable way. So I wanted to know if that was true.
Okay. All right. That's a topical question. Thank you for that, Rose. Gabrielle,
Okay.
right over to you. What has your understanding and your experience been about that matter of discrimination against Africans and against African descended people?
Sure. So that was happening in Guangzhou, China. And that's in the south of China. So like not specifically in Beijing. From what I've read and what I've seen, it does seem that it happened. It does seem that that is something that, you know, a terrible situation that happened. The Chinese government, when they got a lot of media attention, because China has a thing like they call like yanzi, which is just like face, right? They were very quick to act and to say like, oh, you know, like we didn't do anything. And they tried to take measures to reprimand. But what I will say is that, you know, there's a lot of tensions, especially in Guangzhou, China, between Chinese people and Africans. And it's mostly because a lot of the Africans that are in Guangzhou, China, like there's a large variety. There are people who are very malicious. There are people who are criminal, but there are also people that are extremely wealthy. Like they make a lot of money. And then there's that like that jealousy that develops, that like, oh, you guys just come here, you take our women, you take our money. So, you know, that does happen. So in Guangzhou, China, there was already that underlying existing tension. So I think the COVID virus just amplified it. People probably had it and, you know, they didn't say anything, but the COVID virus gave them an excuse to be like, you guys are bringing the virus back to China. Because at the time, China had somewhat contained the virus, and the only persons that were, you know, infecting anyone were the people that were coming back to China. So they were like, oh, you guys are, you know, you're infecting us, you know, and, you know, I think that the way you think about that is really strange if you ask me. But, you know, there were already underlying tensions, and I think they just used the COVID-19 virus as an excuse to say, now we have the right to do this. Now we should do this because you guys are, you know, harming us. Now it's not because you're rich. Now it's not because you supposedly could sell drugs, or no, it's not because like my wife left me for you. It's because you guys are infecting us. So there is it's a very complex. It's very complex. It's not very straightforward. It's very complex. There's a lot of things to understand about it, but it did happen. I will say that once China started to get a lot of negative media about this, like, because China, they're very, very, very concerned about their image. So anything that tarnishes their image, they try to fix that as soon as possible. So they did say like, oh, it was just a few bad apples, don't worry, we'll deal with them. But I won't say it's as simple as that. I will say that there are a lot of other underlying issues, especially in Guangzhou, China, because of how successful a lot of Africans have been in Guangzhou. Like, they're very rich. Like in Guangzhou, China, a lot of Chinese women dream to marry one of these rich African men.
Understood. And that's so interesting to hear. Gabrielle, you're really taking us through this as if we are sitting right there in the space with you. So thank you for that. Thank you for the vividness of how you share the information. And I'm sure many of the persons who are responding here, they're responding to what you're saying and saying that it's always been there, etc. So definitely, I think there's agreement with your stance and your observations as it relates to racism. We're going to go into the giveaway, and then we're going to close off this segment with asking both Gabrielle and Alison to give us some of the tips, some of the strategies that they utilized to help them manage the pandemic, especially being away from some aspects of their, like for Gabrielle, being away from family, and for Alison, just not being in a space that, you have called home for longer than 12 years, right? So we have a giveaway coming up. I'm going to invite everybody who has a Digicel cell phone to take it out if you're not using it for this. And I'm going to give you some numbers. And if you are quick to the draw, you can walk away with $1,000 credit for your device, right? So let me see if you are ready. Ready, steady, go. The numbers are, this is for Digicel. Let's remember, for Digicel, the numbers are 0660-0038-6135. And if you get it, put up your hand in the comments so we can make up a little noise video, right? And celebrate. And then we're going to have a giveaway coming up for persons who have a Flow device. And that's going to be a little bit later on in the segment. All right. So anybody has gotten it? Anybody get the Digicel credit? Put your hands up or say yay in the comments. Olivia said, go on again with the number. Nobody don't get it. I does not seem so. Yay!
Yes.
Let's make some noise for Tori. Good job. Congratulations. And so for all of you who have a Flow device, please stay tuned because we're coming up to you and be as quick as Tori. All right? So, and Olivia says congratulations. So sweet of you, Olivia. So in terms of managing, mental health is so important and our well-being. What are some of the tips, Alison, that you were able to employ? I know that it's not always consistent, but what did you find was helpful for you in managing, this period of history, especially being in the UAE?
Well, first, let me say it was good for our family, because for the first time in our marriage and for the children, all of us were in our home together, and my husband, because they had shut down the country and there were no flights. So we were all together, and the bonding and the opportunity to do so was really enhanced. I know that he has gone back to work. It's a little bit, because they're not allowed to come back into the space. They have to be kept in another location for a 24-day cycle.
Wow.
So, and we can't interact, we can't go and see him. So what I did, which everybody did as well apparently around the world, is I cleaned from top to bottom and I made bread.
So many of us became bakers overnight.
I know with the baking. But then I've still found that was not fulfilling because I was missing the human experience. Yeah. And because I was working from home from the end of March or early April, I found that the days were just rolling into one. So weekends were no different from weekdays. So I made a list of persons who I needed to call. I deliberately did that, especially persons who were living alone and they couldn't, like older women who were living alone. And I had to make a list so I could coordinate the time because we're 9 hours ahead. So I had to be able to hit that time when persons are awake and I'm not asleep. And that has made a significant difference in how I've been able to keep my contact with my family and friends, whether it be in the US or in Jamaica or anywhere in the world, in the UK. So that's one thing I did. I made a deliberate attempt to make my contact list. And I'm using the same social media, Zoom and WhatsApp. But the second thing I did, which some people might find a little strange, but because of my relationship with Emirati women, which has been so unique, and they have let me into their lives, I have actually been able to learn so much from them. They don't do anything in halves. And so I decided that the Emirati women in my circle, I would send a message of encouragement and thanks for something that they taught me or they did for me. Wow. And what it did was it had a knock-on effect, which I didn't anticipate, or that wasn't really the reason behind my doing so. But because most of them or all of them were within my work environment, I had more or quicker feedback from things that I needed from those very same women. If I needed a file or I needed an email sent or something, they were most responsive. And so it became like a sisterhood in this work environment. And for the children, we decided that we would have at least once a week a takeout and movie night event or something that we did together. Either we played a board game or we rented a movie and we'd order pizza or Indian food, something that we could bond together as a family, because they're working in the day during school and I'm working as well. So we actually made time for those family events as well.
That's so beautiful. I especially love the part about the intentionality, Alison, of reaching out and connecting with the women who have been supportive to you. And I can only imagine that that's something like that only grows in terms of, you know, people paying it forward too. It inspires people to just continue that energy. So that's beautiful. And I think all of us can take a page from that book to say, you know, we've heard it so many times, but reaching out to other people when they cross our minds in a very intentional way too.
Yes,
you know?
yes, absolutely.
You know, so we love that takeaway from you. Thanks, Alison. And for you, Gabrielle, what were some of the things that you drew on to help you get through this period?
Sure, awesome. So I actually do have a nice little PowerPoint that I want to have in the background, just so that you guys can follow along as I'm talking, and just in case my internet goes again. Hopefully it doesn't. So let me pull that up. All right, are we all able to see that?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing I did was take a break from the news. So one of the things that I realized as well, a lot of news articles were going around. And I feel like when that happens, a lot of people also use it as an opportunity to spread fake news. So there are a lot of fake news. For example, one of the ones I remember was that China has gotten the go ahead to kill 200,000 people or something like that. And I feel like when that happened, a lot of people were saying to me like, Gabby, are you going to be one of those people that they kill? Are they going to get rid of the foreigners first? Wow. So that was something that, you know, like reading a lot, because, you know, one of the things that, you know, I discuss as well, like at my job, is that usually in times of crisis, a lot of people use this as an opportunity to create anxiety. So they spread a lot of fake news, and it shares really quickly, because a lot of people, they like the not necessarily the hype, but how how interesting it sounds, like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And then yes, and then what happens is that people, they start getting worried, you know, like I remember one night I didn't sleep the entire night, and it was really because I kept like, you know, like, oh, there are 15,000 people that just got coronavirus. America just shut down their borders. You know, and then there were a lot of things. People were just like, Gabby, you need to come home. Gabby, you need to come home. So one of the things that I did was I took a break from the news and I read 14 books because I had a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it was good also to like immerse myself in something else that would take my mind off the whole coronavirus and all of its mess. And then the other thing is that you also want to take care of your body. So, you know, one of the things that I tell my mom and my sister, like when they're just like, make sure you're safe, wear your mask. I'm just like, eat your vegetables. And they're just like, okay. And I tell my mom, like, Mom, make sure you're eating fruits, make sure you're eating vegetables. You should be sleeping 8 hours every night. Like you know, you're one of the people that are in that vulnerable group. And it's because a lot of people, you know, they neglect their health. And they forget that your health is your wealth, and it's your first line of defense.
Absolutely.
When you come in contact with a virus. Like, you know, a lot of people are thinking, oh, I have great doctors, you know, all of that stuff. That's great. But if your immune system is compromised, those great doctors can only do so much and no more. And then make some time to unwind, you know. So besides reading books, I caught up with all of my series. I watched so many movies. My friend and I, we cooked. Well, I cooked and she washed the dishes. But we, you know, like we were just eating, chatting. It was a great time to just like sit down and relax and catch up with what was happening with her. She could catch up with what was happening with me. You know, we'd go on YouTube and see like, oh, what is it like living here? Maybe this will be my next adventure because, you know, we're leaving China. So, you know, or sometimes just do nothing. Just lay down in your bed, stare at the ceiling and just do nothing. A lot of people feel like they should always be productive. They should always be doing something, but really sometimes the best thing for you to do is do nothing.
Do nothing. And so for other persons who, oh, you have another one. Go ahead quickly, Gabrielle, before we transition.
Sure. And then the last thing I would say is connect with others. You want to talk to people. You want to feel connected with people. I did a lot of Zoom calls. I did a lot of FaceTime calls. I did a lot of Skype calls with people, just catching up, seeing who's been doing what, you know. And one of the great things that happened to me and really warmed my heart is when this happened, I had people contacting me who I'd never heard of, like who I'd never heard from in years. Yes. I had someone who I'd not spoken to in like 10 years reach out, be like, are you okay? A lot of people who knew me as a baby, they reached out to me and they were just like, oh my gosh, you know, like, Gabby, are you okay? A lot of people are checking in with me. So that really warmed my heart. And there are like 2 questions I got that I wanted to answer from like the Q&A. One of them was like, how am I coping right now? Right now, China has some level of normalcy. So masks in Beijing are optional. But they are recommended. People still do look at you strange if you don't wear a mask, but they won't reprimand you. Like for example, like if I'm walking in a crowded area and I see somebody who doesn't have a mask, believe me, I will walk to the other side of the road. People still do have that there. But for example, if you're just going downstairs for a stroll, you know, people won't look at you funny if you don't have a mask on. But if you're in a crowded area, especially if you sneeze or cough, people do look at you like, what's happening? And the other one was like, how do people respond when they know that I speak Chinese fluently? They're shocked. They're definitely shocked. I usually like to play the dumb foreigner and pretend that I don't understand what's happening until I notice that like their level of English is just not enough to carry the conversation. Then I'll switch over and then they'll look at me like, so you mean to tell me you could speak Chinese all this time? And a lot of time people use it as an opportunity to ask me a lot of questions. They want to know everything. You know, they want to add my WeChat. They want me to teach them English. WeChat is our version of WhatsApp. So that's my experience. Like when people realize that like, oh, I can speak Chinese fluently. And they're even more shocked when they realize that I can read and write. because a lot of foreigners are orally fluent, but they can't read and they can't write. So when they notice that, like when they see me like reading a document, or before I sign a contract for like a gym or anything, and they see me reading and they're just like, oh no, it's not important, we can tell you what's on it. And I was like, no, I'll read it myself. Then they're kind of just like, wow, you can read? So, you know, that's been my experience.
For you, yeah, in terms of having gone there already fluent in the language. So for all of you who are watching, who are thinking of working or living in China, take a page from Gabrielle's book and be absolutely intentional about preparing to go. And mastery of the language is one of the things that has made a huge difference for Gabrielle in terms of opening up so many doors and giving her that comfort to be able to know what they're saying about you sometimes in the elevator, right? So thank you so much to our panelists who have done an amazing job for this segment. I want to take another question from our audience who have been so great as we go into the second segment. And I'm going to call on Janice to share her question, and hopefully Gabrielle and Alison can give their feedback. Welcome, Janice.
Hi there. You can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes.
Okay, I think for the two panelists, I want to find out about the social services and even church or spirituality. How have you managed to stay in touch in that area? And do you have access to social services, if not for you particularly, but for Jamaicans who are there who can relate to persons who are like them?
Thank you so much for that, Janice. Good question. I'm going to start with Alison.
Okay, well, the UAE is a very tolerant country. They actually have a minister of tolerance.
Wow.
So, yes, so we are all as Christians allowed to worship freely. They're actual church buildings. And at the beginning of the lockdown, they asked all religious organizations not to meet, including the mosques for the Muslims as well. So our church has online services, and just for an interesting note, the UAE weekday is from Sunday to Thursday, and we worship on Friday, and then Saturday is the weekend. So it's a Friday, Saturday weekend, and we work Sunday to Thursday. So on a Friday morning, we get up and we log on and we have our Friday services, which is a Christian service. In terms of social services, it's all linked to employment, or healthcare is linked to employment, but also so is your residency, and they go together. So once you have a sponsor, then you will also have health insurance. I'm not sure if that's what she meant by social services, but everything that is available for, for the citizens is available for us as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alison. So many interesting snippets coming out of this conference that many of us didn't know before. So we love that. Thank you for having been an ambassador of the UAE too, to tell us more about the country, about the state, right? So thank you so much. Gabrielle, any feedback from you on that question as it relates to services and spirituality?
Sure. So there are churches in China. They're not like, they don't look like churches in Jamaica. They're basically held in like a special hall, usually at like a hotel or just like an event hall. So those avenues do exist. It's usually mostly strong within the expat community, especially the African community. They're very religious. In terms of like, with regards to healthcare. So I personally use private healthcare because private health insurance is what is given to me with my company. And to be honest, as a Black woman, I do prefer speaking with a doctor who has had interactions with other foreigners and other Black women. But the Chinese healthcare system, in terms of like the cost, it's dirt cheap. You could go to a hospital in China and spend very little money to do very complicated procedures. However, because it's dirt cheap and because how big China is, there is a lot of people. There is a longer wait time. And there's also not as much flexibility with in terms of like conversing in English. The people do speak English, but you have to speak very slowly. You have to pronounce and enunciate your words very well, and you have to wait for them to comprehend, translate, and then respond to you. But that is not to say that it is ineffective. It is just to say that it's a little bit slower, and they do have all of the things that you do need. China also tends to use a lot of natural medicine instead of like the lot of chemicals that we as Westerners pump into our bodies. Now, what does that mean? It means that it's better for the body, but it works a little bit slower and you have to take more of it. So for example, if you want to take a painkiller and you take a Chinese painkiller, you probably take like 4, 5, 6 tablets in a one day. However, unlike Tylenol, unlike ibuprofen and Panadol, it's not as destructive to your liver. So there is that benefit.
Balance, yes.
Yes, yeah, there is that benefit in terms that it's healthier, but it does take a while to kick in. And because we're kind of used to like taking something and then voila, everything goes away, it may be a little bit difficult for us to deal with that, especially when we just want it to go away as soon as possible.
Understood.
And in terms of other social services, they do exist. I will say that I'm not very well acquainted with many of them. And that's because with my company, I do have access to a lot of private healthcare. And since it's paid for, might as well make use of it. So.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle and Alison. This has been, and just from the comments alone, a very informative segment. Michaela says, I must say I'm glad I tuned in. I'm in Jamaica and I'm employing some of the same coping mechanisms. So it's been like really useful to be a part of this session. So thank you ladies so much. And for our panelists, for our audience members, we have another giveaway right as we're going to bring on Carol Thompson and Professor Rain Jarrett, who's going to be sharing with us similarly their experiences in the United States of America. So Alison and Rain and Gabrielle will still be with us, right? So they're right there, but thank you for being on stage for this segment, and your insights are well received, and we're so grateful that you made the time to join us. So here is something for those who have a flow device. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to say it quickly, right? And I'm sure you guys will grab it. So the numbers are 09-8667-4568-2537. And I'm sure somebody grabbed, I feel it in my spirit that somebody grabbed that. All right, so as you are gearing up to tell me who won, we're going to introduce Carol Thompson. Carol works at the Wyckoff, am I pronouncing it correctly, Carol? The Wyckoff Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. And Carol, could you please turn your video on so we can look at your beautiful face? And we also have Professor Rain Jarrett, who's a professor of behavioral and social sciences, and she's also based in the United States of America. Tracy Genus Webley got the credits. Congratulations, Tracy. Enjoy your $1,000 from the hashtag JNCares group. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for future sessions. So I'm going to start off with Professor Jarrett. Prof, give us a little understanding of, you talk often about the stress culture. And definitely this pandemic has, really tapped into that and has made it even more relevant for us to consider. So talk us through what the stress culture looks like and what do we have to bear in mind in terms of responding to it. Not hearing you so well, Prof. It's saying that your video is on, your sound is, so go again, try again. Still not hearing, not sure why. Is your volume all the way up? All right, so while Prof sorts it out, I'm gonna jump over to Carol. So Carol, you are working in a field that is under great pressure right now. And in many ways, New York as a state has been, like, I guess you can say the epicenter of the pandemic in the States. Carol, you're also muted, so could you please just unmute so we can hear you? Perfect.
Yes, we are in the epicenter. I'm in New York, Brooklyn, New York.
And based on your, what should I say, based on your position, based on your role and rank in the hospital, you are in a supervisory role. So management is what you're doing. So talk us through what it has been like for your frontline staff, especially the frontline medical staff in New York during this time. And I'm sure that you also have some Jamaicans, from the diaspora who are also there on the front line working in New York. So what has it been like so far?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your program.
A pleasure.
And yes, I'm Carol Thompson. I'm one of the head nurses at Wyckoff Heights Medical Center. It's close. The hospital is actually on the border of Brooklyn and Queens. Okay. Obviously, at my hospital, I work in the emergency department, like I said before. And when this pandemic started, I mean, there was different types of emotions. I mean, we had to have staff meetings prior to us having the bulk of the patients coming in. There was panic. The nurses were like, of course, scared. This is new to everyone. Of course, it was new to everyone. So from the management aspect or the head nurse aspect, we had to be there to try to allay their fears and work together as a team, and we are the frontliners there. So we had to do what we had to do and what we're taught to do, and which is nursing. It doesn't matter what comes through the door, we have to do what we have to do.
In terms of the individual nurses, who I'm sure you have relationships with, perhaps primarily those who are Jamaican, right? That kind of countrywoman bond.
Yes.
What was it like, being, I guess, relating to them and supporting them in some ways? I can imagine the stress levels were high.
Oh my God, high is not the word. As I said, we were scared. We feared everything. And of course, from a Jamaican standpoint, that like, we cannot fight this invisible, what we're coming upon. So from the Jamaican standpoint, we started doing our little, herbs and our, using what our grandparents taught us to protect ourselves, in a sense that, we're doing the herbs that we know from back home, and say we're going to use that to, boost our defense, immune system. From the Caucasian side and other, Caribbean people, they were just dumbfounded as we were, because this was new to us. But like, again, I said, the height of the anxiety, the fear, the not knowing. Some people stopped coming to work, called out sick. And I mean, you had to understand that, because it was just fear. Sometimes they have sick ones at home that they didn't want, have to probably get the infection and then bring it home to other sick loved ones or family members.
Yes. And I can imagine, as you mentioned about the natural things that our grandparents taught us.
Yes.
I in the comments teasing and saying maybe you bought a lot of garlic and maybe some turmeric.
The garlic and the ginger. Yes, they did, and the lemon. There were so many recipes. I mean, people were throwing out there, tried this, tried that, but the bottom line was with us wearing our PPE gears at all times, and trying to protect ourselves on that line.
So we're now in June. Carol, I can't believe we reached June already, by the way, right? So we're in June.
Yes.
It's been a couple of months since, the pandemic has been declared. And since, the crisis point really hit in terms of New York as the epicenter, what is it like now? I mean, the numbers are still very alarmingly high, but
no, they're not.
Point of the response, the frontline response, what has it been like at this time?
For the past 2 or 3 weeks, there's a decline in our, the patients that are coming in. We have, like just yesterday, we had only one COVID patient that came in. So, I mean, comparing to March to now, it's like there's nothing going on. Absolutely nothing. So we're grateful for that, actually.
Yes. I can imagine. Definitely having only one case come through is a huge change.
Yes.
I mentioned the numbers being high. I was talking about the overall numbers. I mean, it's over 100,000 persons.
Yes.
That's
fast. Yes.
Right,
yes.
fast, and I noticed that Go ahead.
From even my department, we had like over 25 staff members that were infected and had to be out. And in the hospital on a whole, we had 5 employees that died. So
Wow.
this was really serious. And I mean, you know, for those that even were staying away actually because of what was happening. So the staffing, we had little or no staffing. We had to have staff from other hospitals actually, neighboring to come in to help us. And I'm sure most of the hospitals per se had travel nurses that come in to help us, because we had it was at the epicenter, as you said. We had the most of the patients that had the COVID virus was centered in New York. Yes.
I know, I can imagine that your relatives here in Jamaica and your relatives there with you were very worried for you.
Yes, my mother actually and family members are in Jamaica. My mother actually had just come back from Cayman Islands. She was on quarantine for 2 weeks. So of course, she wasn't even concerned about herself. She was concerned about me being in the emergency department every day. And of course, she kept saying, she calls me Mar, be careful, Mar, be careful. We can't even travel to come home. And then, you know, she said, Lord Jesus, you know, I took my mother, I'm an only child. So she was, I mean, my heart went out for my mother. I'm like, Mom, I'm trying my best. I'm okay. I mean, when we're not okay, we still have to say we're okay, because this is what, you know, we signed up for. But, and I FaceTime her, I call her. We developed a family group that every day we would speak to her and other family members to make sure that she's okay.
I'm laughing because I'm also an only child. And so I totally understand the mother love and the mother concern.
Yes.
Especially
and I too have an only child, so I guess I could.
Carol, we just muted you by accident. Can you unmute for us, please?
Great. Oh, hello. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just saying I too have an only child, so I guess I kept it in the family as well. But yes, her concern was, I don't know, even in our WhatsApp group, it was like, Mar, everybody pray for Mar. I mean, we have other family members that are in the healthcare profession, but for me, I'm the only one that is actually centered in an emergency department. So of course, all the prayers, all the well-wishing every day, and I mean literally every day, was pouring in.
Was in your direction.
Yes. So,
do you get a sense that the other staff members are now kind of exhaling in relief?
Of course. Of course, we always say we couldn't even breathe with the PPEs, but even now still wearing the PPEs because we are not in that forum where we have to be in with all these patients, having the vents going off, and they were just coming in. I can't explain it, but we're doing compressions on one and then another one coming, and it's something that we have to get some form of healing after, because it was really mind-boggling. We have never seen that. So of course we are breathing. We are actually looking out like we need patients, because we're like more nurses than patients now, because they're not coming in. Somehow, I don't know if we have something else going on in New York now, so they may be doing that, but the census is so low, very low.
And I'm so glad for technology. I mean, I hear Claudine echoing it in the comments, that technology has given us that means of still staying connected.
Yes.
And even when Gabrielle mentioned earlier about, FaceTiming and Zoom, everybody mentions it now. But it's so important to turn your camera on sometimes so people can see you, because it almost feels like the real thing.
That is true. That is true.
That you were able to get the support from mom and from other family members, and to also be supportive, to other members of the Jamaican diaspora, and of course your wider staff network. Because I feel inevitably when is a Jamaican to a Jamaican, a Yardie to a Yardie, I feel like there is that deeper sense of, you know, the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And the support kind of maybe, you know, is more significant in that space.
That's true. That's true. But it's like they look to me for that, you know, extra support, and which of course I deliver at any time. I'll be done, but you'd never know, because I mean, in a leadership role, you have to act accordingly. So
Yes.
I mean, we had to do what we had to do.
You had to stay strong.
Yes.
And I hope that in staying strong, you are tapping into self-care also. And that's one of the tips that we're sharing with all our audience members, all of our Jamaicans overseas. Like, especially when you're on the front line supporting others, you have to make sure that you are refueling.
That you're okay. Definitely. Of course, eating right, or actually they did feed us. We had private sectors that dropped off food at the, you know, the emergency department, and we were fed. So, but it's just you could be fed on a national basis, but when you have to, on a level of mental, you know, you have to, you know, that's on a different level. But yes, we take our vitamins, we drink our water, we eat as much, and when we could, we did that, and try to rest. Rest is actually very important, but of course it depends on the day, because the images just keep, you know, playing in your head. But we did our best. So for me personally, I sleep. I just block everything out and sleep to know that tomorrow at 5:30 I have to be up again to do it over again. So
can we just raise our hands in the audience section to just show some support and gratitude for people like Harold Thompson, Jamaican leader, who's on the front line in New York, just helping us to fight this pandemic, you know, in support of the whole the United States of America. Can we just, you know, respect the fact that this is a huge sacrifice, and we definitely thank you and honor you for your service.
Thank you so much.
And the hands are going up in the audience section. Thank you so much.
I'm receiving it humbly. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. I'm going to jump over to Rain, to Prof. Rain, for a second, to just talk about what your experience has been like, Prof, in terms of, you know, having your ears on the ground in your capacity as, you know, a leader in the diaspora, and also as Rain the person, you know. What has it been like for you being in the United States during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Firstly, I think my location to Jamaica has been important because despite the social isolation that most of us have been experiencing, we have that connection to family and friends there. So we also often get news from Jamaica before we get it here about what's happening in the United States. So that has been interesting, but also helpful, because like some of the panelists, I have made an intentional decision to stay away from the news as a coping mechanism for myself. So, you know, schools, as Gabrielle said, are often an indicator of sort of tempering the waters, right? So schools started to close, and I'm an educator, so I have a personal vested interest in that. Schools started to close around the end of March. My daughter as well. We have different school systems in our county, and so they're privy to their own structure. But that was the indication that something was happening and that it was serious. What is interesting is that I live in one of the biggest counties in Fort Lauderdale, Broward, and we have had very high rates of corona infections here. And so there was a particular sense of panic in this particular community. But in general, what is also interesting, like Alison shared, is that the United States is not one homogeneous region. We have separate states that have different laws, different policies, different ways of maneuvering these sorts of things. And so it's been different all around the United States. What has been interesting and very, very helpful for me is keeping in touch with other young Jamaicans all over the US diaspora, but also the Canadian diaspora, Africa, Middle East, etc., through different social media chats. So we've been able to feel what it's like being a Jamaican experienced in other parts of the world, but also keeping that connection, which has been really helpful. So, you know, at this point, we've had similar experiences like border closures, airspace closures. Things are now starting to open. In some cities, it is required to wear a mask still, especially when going to public spaces, but for others, it's by choice. We definitely don't have strict measures like they did in China and in the Emirates. Yes. And so there's more of an expectation, but you have a little bit more liberty and freedom in terms of how you maneuver and your choice. So the social norm is still to wear masks, to still appreciate and respect social distancing. But in certain areas, that's not the case. People are now starting to go out and interact, and it's almost as if, you know, we've been locked up for 3 months, and so people are excited to be out and about. And in some cities, they're not taking the measures that they need to be safe, to keep themselves safe, and to keep others safe. So I'm happy to be here in a place where the Jamaican culture and influence is very strong. It's very prominent. You know, we have restaurants and supermarkets where we can get our products, we can eat our food. We hear Jamaican music very often. So I've missed that. I've missed that because, you know, I still feel a very close sense of my connection to my culture because of how it is here. But that's been the general sort of temperature here regarding COVID.
The pandemic. Thank you for that. Yes. And also we have to big you up too for being intentional also about, you know, being in support of the community, and especially by way of just keeping the connections. That alone I know is valuable to so many of the young people that you have been supporting, you know, virtually, you know, and just consistently. So that's awesome. I definitely want to hear your thoughts, Prof, especially from, you know, the academic, sociological standpoint of the stress culture. You were talking about it earlier.
Before we got disconnected, we were having some technical difficulties, but we figured it out. Come on, we figured it out. And technology stresses me out, so I had to do some of my deep breathing to get through that. But we worked through it.
101.
Yeah. I think what is interesting is that these are unprecedented times, right? For the first time in our lifetime, really, the world has been experiencing a pandemic simultaneously. And if we stop and think about that alone, the gravity of that,
it's huge.
Right? It's huge, right? It never before has this happened, right? So just the gravity of that. But despite this being a global sort of occurrence, we've had very varied experiences. And regardless of that variation, the pandemic for sure presents a threat. It presents a threat to our health, to our families, to our loved ones, to our businesses, to our jobs, our financial security, and like we said, to our social connections. And so many have been forced into isolation, not being able to be in touch with family and friends. And for us who are away from our country, who we love so much, this becomes so vital for us in order to sort of keep going and, you know, being able to still feel that connection. So a lot of people, especially the young people that I've been speaking to all over the world, young Jamaicans, are really struggling with this new normal. And that is post-COVID. So I think now the narrative is going to be pre-COVID, post-COVID, right? As a measuring stick, which we've already started to see in conversation. I think what is important to note also is that pre-COVID, social scientists were talking about the culture of our modern day society, right? Characteristically, what does our modern day society look like? And as events continue to unfold, COVID, you know, the stress of this chronic culture that we exist in, right? Where we are busier than ever before. We are spending time away from family members and friends more than ever before. We're spending less time on ourselves. I need to probably move to the Emirates so that we can get ingrained in that culture where self-care is normalized, right? But also the civil unrest with the recent death of George Floyd, right? Scientists also are predicting that this is going to be the worst hurricane season in history. So when we think about the complexity of our social environment, it is increasingly volatile. The uncertainty is on at an all-time high, right? The ambiguity, it is a lot. It creates this perfect storm. And I think socially, being more stressed than ever before, and all of what I just experienced, it's been difficult. It's been difficult. When we think about how the brain works, right? When we think about when we're under stress, what happens to our brain, I think this becomes important for us to understand because it sort of normalizes the experience, right? So when we experience a threat, and I would say that we are under threat, right? I just mentioned a couple of reasons why. The brain registers social threats the same way that it does physical threats. So say we step out in the road and a car is about to hit us, and our brain says, danger, come out of the road, right? As a way to keep us safe. These social threats that I just talked about register in the same way. And there are certain social factors that we identify with, right? We call them social models that sort of processes the way our brain registers threats. I'm going to just talk about a few of them. This is according to the SCARF model, which is a brain-based framework that outlines the social factors that our brain registers, right? That are equal to physical threats. So status, right? Do I have a job? What is going to be the outcome of my business? What is the status of my relationships? Certainty, what is going to happen next? What does our new normal look like? Autonomy, the freedom to be able to go and come as you choose, is under threat. That is not an option. It is slowly becoming more and more flexible in terms of mobility. Relatedness, that is the missing the family and missing the friends. And fairness, right? How do we perceive the social climate in terms of justice? And I think the current racial tension is a good illustration of a lack of that justice. So those different social components or dynamics or factors really sort of decide how that threat is registered and therefore how you respond. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I think you went a little bit quiet just now. Go again. Let me see if you are.
Can you hear me? Are we
Yeah.
back?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
I'm having some internet issues and I'm not in China, so I shouldn't. But my apologies on that. So this SCARF model, right, explains to us that uncertainty, which I think all of us can identify within some degree, is the biggest at threat right now. The amount of certainty is activating our highest level of threat. And if we think about
you went through SCAR. What's the F? What does the F stand for in the model?
Fairness.
Fairness. Okay.
Fairness. So that's that level of justice, right? Which we talked about with George Floyd. So that's the SCARF model. And so that becomes really important because when there's an absence of those elements in the SCARF model, right? Again, our brain registers that there's a threat. So when we don't have the status, when we don't have the certainty, when we don't have the autonomy, when we don't have the relatedness, and when there's a lack of fairness, our brain says danger, right? And if we think about our experiences during these 3 months of this COVID quarantine, I think each of us would identify with one, if not multiple, of those social dynamics and factors. And so it creates sort of this perfect storm. And depending on what you've experienced, whether it's the worry about the job or the maintaining the role as head of the household, or as I mentioned, your job security, when will this all end? What does our new normal look like? Right? Not feeling control of your time. So for us here in Broward County, we have curfew still. And so if we are getting back on the road and doing things as we sort of did before, we have now this worry of, am I going to get home by 9 o'clock, right? All of these things. So depending on how you answer those questions in terms of what you identify with, your experience will highlight which of those social domains that drive how your brain works, right? And so what we know is that when our brain perceives a threat, we fall into fear. And so when we fall into fear, what happens is the part of our brain becomes very active, the amygdala. It's as small as an almond, but very powerful. And when we're in this state of fear, right, our cognitive functions decline. We're not able to think as clearly as we would like to or focus as well. Our heart rate increases oftentimes, which is what some people can identify with stress. We become very reactive in terms of our state. So for some parents, they've been snapping at their children, right? And having less of a capacity to maneuver those situations in a healthier way, or snapping at your partners, etc., etc. So the higher the threat, the lower your cognitive ability and the lower capacity you have to make effective decisions or solve challenging problems or meet children where they are. All these things are happening as we are experiencing this threat. So I think that is really important to understand, because if you can understand what you're experiencing, for some, this fear of threat is showing up as anxiety.
Yes.
For some, it's showing up as depression. For some, they're not quite sure how they're feeling, but them know them just feel away, right? Understanding what is happening in the brain and the brain science behind fear and threat sort of creates this commonality in the experience, that it is, you know, you remove the judgment from it. And I think that is crucially important, right? Despite how varied our experiences have been. So I want to pause there. I feel like I've said a lot, and I want to just check in with you if you have questions, or if anybody in the webinar has any questions.
So we have a comment to start off from, let me scroll up. Janice says that she loves what you're saying, because you're pretty much drilling down into what you wanted to get out of the session. So the understandings of the what, the how, the why in terms of coping. So thank you for doing that, Prof. Jarrett. And I love the SCARF model in terms of just how much it summarizes what many of us have been going through. Yes. I came across a much more urban definition or framing of what many of us have been going through, and it's called the Corona coaster, right? Somebody coined that phrase. In which
the Corona, what was that?
The Corona coaster.
Okay.
Similar to a roller coaster, we're on the Corona coaster.
Yes.
So some of us, similar to Alison from the previous session, at some point or other, we were baking and we were organizing our closets and we were on top of everything. And then the next week we're drinking wine for breakfast, right?
Yes.
And we're missing things we don't even like. So I love that you teased out the element of self-compassion and removing judgment from, you know, how we are responding or not responding right now, because the reality is that this season calls for flexibility, agility, and understanding, because things are vastly different. And it's a huge amount of stress that we're undergoing without even realizing sometimes that we're undergoing it. Yes?
Absolutely. And which is why I thought that was important to sort of explain for just a few minutes the neuroscience behind our experiences. That becomes very important. Absolutely. The understanding, the awareness.
Mm-hmm. There is another huge element, and I saw someone preempt us in the comments, that is contributing to the layers of stress that members of our Jamaican diaspora are experiencing right now. And that is the sense of the heightened racial tensions, especially in the wake of, you know, the murder, right, of George Floyd and other Black Americans, Black people in the United States. I'm going to jump over to Carol to get Carol's kind of thermometer as it relates to, you know, racism in the States, especially for a member of the Jamaican diaspora. Carol, is it something that you have experienced, especially being at the level you are in your nursing profession? Can you speak to us quickly about that, Carol, in terms of what your experience has been like? Do we still have Carol on? Oh, Carol is muted. Are you able to speak now, Carol? Let me just check.
Hello?
Yes, excellent.
Hi. So, what was the question? I'm sorry.
No problem. So I was just asking what your experience, have you had experiences of, you know, racism, especially being a Black woman, an Afro-descended woman who is at a significant level, you know, in your nursing profession?
Daily.
Wow.
The unsaid word, the spoken word, the stares, the glares. Yes. But as Maya Angelou say, we rise.
Yet still.
That's why I'm at this plateau. Yes.
Excellent.
But for me personally, I brush it off. That's why I'm where I'm at today. And I'm one of the only Black head nurses in my emergency department. I work with whites, Filipinos, every sector, every color, every shade. And I'm one of the only Black person. They respect me, well, even if it's in front of my face. But I mean, I've been there for 15 years. So I think I've earned their respect, and it's mutual. So, but initially, yes, there were whispers. I mean, why she got it, blah, blah, blah. But I proved myself, and they've come to respect me, yes. On a broader scope, of course. Right now, I mean, we're talking about the COVID, but I mean, on every television set, you'll see what's actually happening now. And the one thing that I'm happy about is that if you see in any audience there, there's more whites than Black people. So that's telling you something. The racial barriers they're not down, but they're crumbling. They're crumbling. Our voices have been heard and is still being heard. And others, Caucasians, are on this platform as well. So I'm happy for that.
Excellent. And you know, it was so stunning, even though it was expected in some ways to hear when you started off by saying daily, you experience it daily. And us in Jamaica, it can be jarring because though we have colorism here in Jamaica, you know, and we have status wars and status issues, it's not as jarring. Racism isn't as prevalent here, just by virtue of how our society is made up. So it's definitely something that we're adjusting to even mentally, you know? So thank you so much for that. Prof Rain, your experience, you know, especially personally as well as professionally, as someone who is in support of the diaspora, what are your thoughts on what's happening now? I mean, it's heightened now, but obviously it's not new. What are your thoughts on the state of things as they are now?
It's an interesting time. I think growing up in Jamaica for most of my adult years, I moved to Cuba for a year after high school and then moved here. So I grew up in Jamaica, spent my adult years there. But when I came here, it was the first time for me that I was really pushed to self-identify racially. I think for me, you know, race wasn't an issue living in Jamaica. Colorism is certainly present. And I think there is a legacy of slavery that is still very active and present in our culture as well. But I didn't have to think about how I classified myself racially. That wasn't the experience before moving here. And I think for me, being light-skinned, which I didn't consider myself also before moving to the United States, it presented a bit of privilege and a bit of racial ambiguity, to be honest. That people were confused about what was I, and I got asked that question, what are you? And it was very perplexing for me because I thought, well, what are you really asking me? I'm not quite sure. And I'm not, right? And over time, I understood that they're asking me, how do I classify myself racially? So that happened very early on, and that was a little off-putting. It felt very awkward and very uncomfortable for me. But as I continued on my educational journey and continued my studies, I didn't have much of that because the people that I was around in my educational institution were educated people. They were very social justice minded because of what I was studying, and there was some consciousness about, you know, identity and culture and differences, and so that experience was positive for me. But then going into the university setting and becoming a professor in a tertiary level education institution was very interesting because for the first time I saw the intersectionality of multiple social factors influencing how I was perceived and treated. So not just my race and the confusion around what race I was. Am I Hispanic? Am I Black American? And however that's classified. But my age as well, I appear very young. And so you know, I often got the look of, what are you doing here? You belong in here? Yeah, so, you know, and then I'm a female as well. And what was interesting is I would get a lot of the discrimination really from other women in positions of leadership, which I thought very interesting, some of whom were minorities as well. So my experience racially has been interesting. As I said, I acknowledge that I have some amount of privilege because I am a light skin or fair skin according to racial standards here in the United States. But it is still very present, it is still very real, and I still experience discrimination here in a part of the United States that seems to be a little bit more diverse than other parts of the country. South Florida is Kingston 20. And so Americans here are used to seeing people who look like me. But the racial tension is still very present. And especially in the last few years where people feel a lot more confident in expressing their ideas and their beliefs and their feelings around race. You know, it's just become unbelievable and sometimes unbearable, to be honest.
Yeah. And, you know, we definitely could not have had this conversation without touching on that because it's so present to the experience of members of the Jamaican diaspora, right?
Absolutely.
And, I mean, it's kind of shy away from talking about it, but it's so important to speak on it, especially from the standpoint of helping people to manage all that it brings. Because it does add stress, it does add fear, and so it impacts on our mental and emotional well-being.
Sure. Sure. I wanted us to talk a little bit, if we have time. Kamala, I'll let you, you're the boss, so I'll let you tell me if we have time. I've gotten a lot of questions from friends, from colleagues, from clients about, you know, how do I talk to my children about race? What does that look like? So if we could, I would like to talk about that for maybe 2 or so minutes. Talking about race with your children can be very difficult, right? We often worry that we're not doing it right, that we're doing it wrong. Some parents don't feel affected by it, so they don't talk to their children about race, and that's a part of the privilege. And others feel the impact of race on a daily basis, and so they understand very clearly why it's important to talk to their children about race. Parents, teachers, adults in general often, again, experience this discomfort, right, when talking about race. And so sometimes, because of the discomfort, when we're uncomfortable about something, we shy away from it. We don't want to deal with it, and so we avoid it, right? But this can be very problematic. So I'm just going to give a few takeaways for your participants on the webinar. The first thing is that children are not colorblind, so we should not be color silent. What does that mean? Children start to notice physical differences around 6 months old. And many of them learn over time not to talk about these differences, right? That talking about these differences is bad. And so color silence can cause this confusion, right? And racial stereotypes can fester. And this is compounded also by how we ourselves react to and speak about race. So the first thing I would want to say to our listeners who are parents, who are aunties, uncles, grandparents, caregivers, there's nothing wrong with talking about race. There is nothing wrong with children talking about these physical differences, right? What is important is the value that we attach to those differences, right, or whether we devalue those differences altogether, right? That is the important part. So my daughter is in a very good school here in Broward County. It is a very small, tight-knit community. And shortly after coming home from school one day in kindergarten, she says, "Mommy, I have brown skin and Julie has white skin." And for me, that was an opportunity. This is now 3. She's 3.5, 4 years old in kindergarten. And that is an opportunity to have that conversation, right? And to be mindful of the messaging that you're sending your children when you engage them in the conversation. So for me, that opportunity was also a chance for me to explain these differences, right? To explain, yes, you do have brown skin, and Julie has white skin, and it's because all of us have melanin. Some have more than others. And guess what? You have more melanin than anybody in your class. So that is why you are so brown, right? Not to down talk or devalue Julie's whiteness, right? But to do it in a way. You and I spoke before our session today, and I quite enjoyed the conversation. And one of your concerns was, how do we speak to our children in a way that doesn't celebrate the negative component of those differences, right? So we don't want to say, you have brown skin and brown skin better, right? Yeah. That's not the message that you want to send. You're trying to have that conversation and navigate it. You're trying not to create a complex in your child, right? So that can be a tendency to celebrate and big up their difference and downplay the others, and that can be problematic. So just a couple more things. When you're talking to children about race, be cognizant of your message and your own racial bias, right? Each of us, despite our consciousness, walk around with biases. Talk clearly to kids about their physical differences. Again, explain the reason behind it. And again, don't downplay, right, the other. The second thing is, take it a step further. If your children are coming to you and asking you questions about race, don't shut them down, break it down for them, but also go to their school and say to their teacher, you know, I think it might be time for us to have a bigger conversation about our differences. So and so came home and told me about an experience or asked me a question. Maybe we can have a bigger conversation about it and build that awareness about diversity and ethnicity and identity off the bat. Get in front of the issue, right? And don't wait for it to become an issue, because children hear, they listen to your conversations, they hear the news, and they have questions and they're curious, right? So I just wanted to give some parents a few tips, because that has been very present in my conversations with friends and colleagues. So I wanted to share that, and hopefully that was helpful.
Rain, absolutely, absolutely powerful shares there. Cecilia, who is from Jane Circle, helping us to capture the gems from tonight's convo, and she put it down perfectly. I love that quote. If your children are not colorblind, so we should not be color silent. That's epic, right?
That's right. That if nothing else, that should be the takeaway, right? And don't shut them down, break it down when they come to you, and arm yourself. If you need to know, how do I have a conversation with my kids, DM me. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you as well on Instagram. That's the best way to get in touch with me.
Rain, could you just drop your IG handle in the comments so that everybody can see it?
Sure.
So Rain is speaking from a professorial standpoint, but also from the standpoint of being a mindful parenting coach, right? So
yes, thank you, Amanda. Amanda, my intern, is on. She has just posted my handle, and my business partner, Sky, as well. So thanks for that.
Excellent. And they're quick on the draw too. We love it.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know, one of the things that you said or referenced, Professor, in your comments that I just want to underline is the fact that sometimes we tell children, or we ask them to do what we say and not what we do. So it's so important for there not to be hypocrisy, or let's just say discrepancies, and without judgment, discrepancies in what we're telling them versus what we're doing when people show up at our doorsteps from different, ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds.
Absolutely.
It's have a solid message that we're living.
Yeah, well. It's a reality check for all of us. It's an opportunity for us to be introspective and to really think about how can we be a solution, play a role in the solution, but also how are we possibly a part of the problem, right? And I think to your point, our own racial biases, this is an opportunity for us to think about what those are, and are we teaching these to our children?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I saw someone earlier asking if we can have a part 2 to this. And even yesterday, you and I were talking about possibly continuing the convo, especially around, something that is very present to me also in terms of how do we teach our children how to be racially conscious without giving them, overload, emotional overload, psychological overload, and so forth.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that, to delve a little deeper into that. Yes, that would be great.
So we are right upon the end of our segment. We have one final giveaway, which is a wellness box curated by myself, my company, White Lotus Blooms Wellness Services. And we're going to give that away to one lucky attendee in a couple seconds, right? But before
I want it. Can I have it? I'm just joking.
We'll talk. Talk to Claudine.
I want a wellness box.
You deserve it.
So exciting.
You deserve it. I want to just call upon each of our other panelists before we wrap it all up, just to give us, for example, Alison is in the UAE. Alison, is there anything from the UAE that has become very dear to your heart? Because I want to create a quick space for us to have a little cultural exchange that you want to teach us, expose us to, tell us about before we wrap up and tell our viewers good evening.
Yes, actually, I have been quite a risk taker as it relates to food from all parts of the world.
I love it.
But my favorite is the humble date.
Ooh.
And dates are a very big part of Arabic culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big part of UAE culture. You're not going to go into an office or home and not find the date. Mm-hmm. This one is my favorite. It's called Sokare. It's a very sweet date. This is the dried version. And it is said that you must eat dates in odd numbers. And the best number to eat is 7.
Wow.
It will give you a daily shot of micronutrients and all that you need for the body for one day.
We could not have not had that because I learned so much in that. So I didn't know that was a thing, that the recommendation is to eat them in odd numbers. That's so fascinating.
In odd numbers. But 7 is the best number.
I like 7 too. Thank you so much, Alison. We're going to jump over to Gabrielle. Gabrielle, you are a master at Mandarin, and I could not end our segment without asking you to teach us at least one thing in Mandarin before we all go. So after live class, we can all say that we were exposed and that we were expanded culturally by this evening session. So Gabrielle, what do you want to teach us? Something quick and something that we can catch on to fast in Mandarin.
Sure. I'm trying to turn on my video, but it's saying that I can't because the host has stopped it.
Okay. Let me just go ahead and turn your permissions.
Oh, there we go.
All right. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I could teach you how to say Jamaica.
Yes.
Ya mai tia. Okay. So it's like ya mai tia.
Yai, my
No. Like no. It's like you're saying ya, like ya, like ya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like ya mai.
Yeah. My.
Like you're my, like you. All right. So Chinese is a tonal language. So if you don't say the things I say in the same tone, you're saying something else, right? So what I was trying to have you, so you have to say just like me. Ya mai jia. So it's like ya.
Yeah.
My.
My.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. I'm going to
Ya mai jia. Like, 你好，我是牙买加人。
你好.
Like, hi, I'm Jamaican. 你好. Okay, let me start with 你好 then, because that's one's easy. It's like you're saying your ni and how. So 你好.
你好. That one is easy. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's
Gabrielle.
better.
你好. Awesome. So we learned something from the UAE, something from China. And I'm going to just finalize by asking Prof. Jarrett. Hold on, Carol. Where is Carol? Carol, are you with us? Carol, I'd just like to ask you to just leave maybe one word of encouragement with anybody else who is on here who is serving in the front line, whether medical or not. What would you want to share with them from your experiences so far as a word of encouragement?
Well, just to encourage everyone that is in the medical profession that, we came into this profession to help, the sick. And we have to do it to the best of our abilities. It doesn't matter how our day goes. At the end of the day, at least if one patient can say thank you, that makes my day. And to all the essential workers, not just in New York, but everywhere, I commend us for doing what we did on the front line. To my colleagues, actually the person who actually referred me to this program, she lost her husband, who was also a nurse. So it hits home, and it's close. It closely hit home to us because she's a dear friend, and Mark was a dear colleague of ours. So it shouldn't be taken lightly, because a lot of people that died that we didn't know, but when it hits home, it hits the hardest. So I just want to encourage us to keep on doing what we do best, and to help each other and care for each other. I have a quote I like, Mayor Angelo, and I just wanted to say a quote to end that: hate, it has caused a lot of problems in the world, but has not solved one yet. And with what's going on, we should eradicate the word hate from dictionary, everything from our vocabulary, because when it hits home, it leaves an emptiness that nothing can fill but the word love. So I enjoyed the program, and I just hope that everybody think twice when they're saying words or doing something that it's not right, or accepting to the culture, or to what we stand for. As Jamaicans, we stand strong, and we should continue to do that. Stand strong and stand for what we believe in. And that's basically what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Carol.
You're welcome.
We're going to jump over to Prof. Rain and ask her to be our judge on this quick challenge that will help us to decide who our winner is of our Wellness Box giveaway to close out our session. So, Prof, you mentioned the scarf model, and we're going to be asking our audience family to drop into the chat the first person to drop 2 of the elements of the model, the SCARF, and it's accurate.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a good one, right? So at least two of the elements of the stress model that Prof mentioned, the social model, that will be our winner. So 2 of them. And we already have a winner. Yes.
Is on it.
Takis. Big up yourself, miss. Congratulations. Prof, call your name quick off the blocks as well.
It was quick on the fingers. She got it.
She was ready. She was ready. So thank you so much, Takis.
Congratulations.
And look at, so Sophia has put all of them. So congrats to Sophia also. Unfortunately, we don't have another wellness box for you, Sophia, but come back next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about some very powerful matters. The topic is Mars meets Venus. And we're going to be attempting to crack the man code as well as crack the woman.
Ooh.
Juicy, right? So please make sure you read this up. You can find the replay of our session in the JN groups on the JN groups Facebook page. So please go ahead and watch it for those of you who want to, dissect again and enjoy the tidbits again. Share with a friend. Next week, register to come on and bring 5 friends with you. That's all we're asking, okay? Can we just drop some blue and yellow hearts in the comment section for the JN group? For, creating a space where we can share, especially for Jamaicans who are far away from home. We thank them always for having created the space. And you all have completed the poll. So I'm going to share the comments now as you're sending up the love in the comment section. I'm going to share the results of the poll. So, question 1. Are you all seeing the results on your screens?
Yes.
Excellent. So question 1, I'm happy I participated in this session. 100% of you said yes. That's the first time we've had that, I think. We've had 97, 98. Everybody's happy they participated. I feel good about my future 100%. I am better equipped to cope with being quarantined abroad. 92% of you said yes, which is awesome. And for those of you who may need additional resources, if you are a JN member, then you qualify to access individual therapeutic sessions with one of JN's partners. So you can reach out to the JN group to get further information as to how you can actually access that. So we see lots of love in the comments. Thank you so much for showing up this evening. To our awesome array of panelists, we thank you immensely for making the time to sit with us this evening and to share so vulnerably, so openly, and so generously. Gabrielle, Alison, Profrine, and Carol, you have been awesome. The feedback has been great. It was a successful session. And I wish you more wellness as you continue to, navigate this new normal.
Thank you for having us.
Stay safe.
I was able to choose a winner, but I want to leave our participants with just something that has really been helpful for me. And it's the idea that life can be messy. It's sometimes painful and hard, but the difference in whether you sink or drown or ride or rise lies in your capacity for resilience. And for us, mindfulness has been that surfboard to ride the waves as they are sure to come. So hopefully we can speak a little bit more about that. But hold tight and stay connected to what you're grateful for and all the good things that are going on in your life, because that makes a difference in how you experience the experience.
Absolutely. Very well said, Prof. And thank you for sharing. If there are persons on here who want to connect with the Jamaica diaspora, in whatever groups are available, you can reach out to Prof. Jarrett as well. She dropped her IG.
Yes,
handle.
I'll be happy to connect you. We have a vibrant machine going and happy to bring more into the fold, for sure.
So a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Takis, please do send us a private message with your contact information. Takis, calling Takis, with your contact information. Please send us a DM right now, a private DM with your contact info, so that we can actually get your box to you. And I see Claudine making some promises, which I won't say on here for Profrine, right?
Yes, Claudine, thank you. I saw that. Thank you much. Right. I'll connect with you offline.
Yes, and Ashley is leaving us with an email, an Instagram handle, global JAU. Okay,
yes, Ashley, she's a part of our social media and communications team. So big up yourself, Ashley. That is how you can communicate with us, and also follow us on Instagram at globaljau. Really, really quick and simple.
Excellent. Takis, please send me a message right now so I can get your surname as well. I know your first name is Takis. So thanks to every single one of you. And as Gabrielle, our master of Mandarin, taught us this evening, we're going to practice it as we close out. We're going to say ni hao.
Ni hao.
I mean, I could teach you guys how to say bye.
Okay.
Since we're leaving.
Go ahead.
Sai.
Sai.
You can kind of say it quick. Sai.
Sai.
Jian.
Yeah.
Sai.
Sai.
Bye, Tan. Adios.
Sending you all lots of love. And we'll meet again next week, Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. for the JN Circle Thrive Together Live class here. It's the best thing ever, right? We'll see you all next week. Have a great one and be well.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for having us.
My absolute pleasure. Takis, are you still on?
Her last name is Thomas, Takis Thomas. I know her actually.
Oh, great. Congratulations. Oh, is Takis in Jamaica? Where you located, Takis?
She is in Jamaica.
Okay, beautiful. All right, everybody, be well, take care, and we'll talk again next week.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Alison.
Bye-bye.
They're literally stripping us. It's like a slap in the face. It really is a slap in the face. And what I'm gathering from